Welcome to the series What Jesus Meant. Hello, I'm happy to introduce you to the series of biblical messages by Dr. Balsan Thampu titled What Jesus Meant. As the title suggests, here's an attempt to unveil the deeper dimensions of Jesus' teachings. But being a Christian is not a requirement for viewing them. Jesus is presented here as the light of the world and not as the icon of a religion. Balsan is a voice heard with attention as a teacher, thinker, author, and preacher in Christian and secular contexts in India for over 4 decades. He teaches as one excited about the contemporary relevance of Jesus' spiritual vision. Through these video messages, he offers the fragrance of a fresh understanding of what it means to be Christian. This is a study series without academic rigors. For best results, viewers need to pursue the trail of thought to the end as a learning and unlearning experience. We hope you enjoy.
A warm welcome to everyone to this series of reflections aimed at discovering and sharing among ourselves the true meaning of the teachings of Jesus. Our focus today is on Jesus' self-revelation as the truth. I have made references to this text earlier, but again let me remind my friends. Jesus said, we find it in the 6th verse of the 14th chapter of John's Gospel, said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So our focus today is on the middle part of that statement, I am the truth. Now, Jesus reveals himself as the truth. Jesus is not saying that I'm committed to truth, or I have come to bear witness to the truth, or that I will uphold truth with all my life. He's saying, I am the truth. That is to say, I am nothing if not the truth. This is very important for those who claim to be the followers of Jesus Christ to realize that commitment to truth is the absolute essential in our discipleship to Jesus Christ. Those who cannot live up to the norm that Jesus Christ upheld, exemplified, in fact, incarnated, that's a correct word, in relation to being the truth, as against just telling the truth, will not be fit for the kingdom of God. And this is a very, very key insight, a very fundamental requirement, and therefore we must get to know what this means, particularly in light of the fact that human beings in their fallen state suffer from a very major disability. A disability in relation to truth. This is widely recognized. Let me give a couple of references. I come from the background of English literature, and therefore let me use a couple of illustrations from that. Let me first take an example from Greek literature. Oedipus the King is a tragedy written by Sophocles. It tells the story of the king Oedipus. Now, the philosophical problem that the playwright addresses in that remarkable work, which I had the privilege to teach at the undergraduate level, is the question, can human beings endure truth? I'm not going to give the details of the story, etc., for want of time. The most fundamental searching question is, can human beings endure the truth? The question that Shakespeare raises in a play called Hamlet is, can human beings ever find out the truth? Then Shakespeare writes a play called King Lear, to which I have made a reference earlier. In that play, Shakespeare addresses the other side of the question. Well, if truth is indeed revealed, can human beings endure the truth? And therefore, he depicts King Lear as going mad when he comes face to face with the truth. And that truth includes the truth about himself, what he has done, etc. So there is this universal issue that pertains to man's capacity or incapacity for truth. And therefore, all that human beings prefer, all that human beings create for themselves, cannot be assumed to be oriented to or driven by truths. In fact, it may be, or it should be assumed, that whatever man does could be uh, an expression of man's craving for illusions, which is the alternative to seeking truth. Now, it's because of this human disability that Jesus came as the truth. The second reason for Jesus coming as the truth is that if truth is removed from human nature, we cease to be human, and in fact, we become worse than animals. This is a reality that is writ large over the human predicament universally, and anyone with a slight interest in observing what happens all around them will immediately understand why this world is full of avoidable suffering, injustice, oppression, cruelty, and suffering. So we are addressing a very large issue of universal scope. And the main thing I want to address or argue is that Jesus' coming into this world is not a religious event. It is God's merciful, compassionate response to the human predicament, so as to liberate them from where they are, which is a spot or a predicament of misery, frustration, barrenness, and futility, and to lead them to a new foundation where they're capable of what it means to be human. And one of the cornerstones of this new humanity is not just commitment to truth, but being the truth. And hopefully this will become clearer as we proceed. Now, one of the major frontiers in human existence, wherein the human incapacity for truth and therefore the human craving for illusions, alternatives to truth, ironically enough, is religion. This may not be realized. Many people are under the impression that religion is a domain of truth. Nothing can be farther from the truth. I say this because I have sought to understand Jesus' mission in relation to religion as religion. And this is very clear, comes out very clearly, and it strikes you with tremendous force that the reason why Jesus made it a point to explicitly reveal himself as the truth was to remind people or to educate the people regarding the fact that commitment to truth is not native to the domain of religion. In fact, religion tries to meet the human craving for illusions, for alternatives to truth, for shortcuts, and for the craving for unmerited rewards, recognitions, etc., all of which constitute the other alternative, which is the alternative untruth. And one aspect of the orientation of religion to untruth or illusions is the excessive importance attached to appearances in religion. In fact, if you look at the psychology of the religious, the passions and priorities in the religious field, you will find, strangely enough, that it is all ridden by the craving for appearance, the craving to be seen, as it were, to be religious. And Jesus deals with it up front in the 6th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, where he comments on the 3 pillars of Judaism: almsgiving, praying, and fasting. And he says, look, you're doing all of this only to draw attention to yourself. In other words, these things do not correspond to the truth of your inner life, This is nothing but the illusion of religiosity or piety that you want to create in order to get a good word from the people around you. So that's the reason why I'm saying that the craving for illusion, the craving to hide truth with untruth, truth with pretenses, truth with attractive appearances, in one word, hypocrisy, is native to religion. Every religion is polluted by this. And the more religious you are, as against being more godly, the more religious you are, the more infected you are with hypocrisy, which is nothing but the craving to be seen as what you are not. So, human beings, therefore, by virtue of their nature, have two completely different sets of needs, or maybe one is a set of needs, the other is a set of desires. Now, in terms of their orientation to illusions, they have to be catered to in terms of providing more and more illusions. And on the other hand, because we are also human, we experience from time to time a craving for the truth, and that happens mostly when we are in a state of suffering, particularly suffering injustice. So at that time, for example, somebody says something bad about me, gossip about me, baseless gossip. At that time, I would very poignantly long for the truth to be established. But if somebody else is being maligned, I may look the other way. So my commitment to truths may not be consistent. That's because even my own self, the idea that I am upright, I am blameless, etc., is also an illusion. So even the craving for the truth about oneself to be revealed, actually, if you really look deep into it, pertains to the domain of illusion. So now let's understand this. How the craving for illusion operates in the domain of religion. First of all, think of the importance that we attach to the grandiose structures that we create in the name of churches. Not everybody can afford grand and magnificent churches, but people strain their nerves, their resources to the utmost in order to create these very impressive structures. Do you believe that the appearance of the buildings in which you worship has anything to do with worshipping God in spirit and in truth? Not at all. Yet, you feel a strange sense of satisfaction when you sit in a grand cathedral and you think you're worshipping, as compared to you being in a small country church. It's a very simple building. You feel that, somehow this is not worship. Now, you don't realize that this is nothing but your own craving for illusions working within you, and therefore this needs to be overcome. Now, consider now the priestly class. Why do priests need this elaborate costume, the priestly vestment? Why do priests create this impression that they belong to a different class of people? Why do they continue to emphasize this utter untruths that they are closer to God as compared to ordinary people? Why do they create this illusion, this aura around them that they are very godly and God will lend his ear, particularly to their prayers and recommendations? You can't blame them. They are trying to meet a need that is operative in the sphere of religion, which is the need for illusion. If priests don't create that illusion through all these things and many more that I have not mentioned, then nobody will listen to them, nobody will turn to them. Their profession will come to an end. So priesthood, unfortunately, is under the obligation to survive on illusions. The more illusions that they create, the better they are recognized and rewarded. So, I can go on giving instances of illusions dominating the sphere of religion. Perhaps that's not necessary. This is a very easily observable fact. So, while this goes on, we also continue to experience another need. For example, the need to worship God, need to be intimate with God, and that is not met by the magnificence or the grandeur of the building in which you sit and worship. Everyone also deep down longs, thirsts for a personal encounter with God. But since that is not part of the organized, established religion or practice of religion, it is suppressed. No one really makes a public statement, look, I'm famishing inside for all the church activities, worship life, etc. I feel famished. Nobody will say that. People live with the truth suppressed within them. So they therefore persuade themselves to believe that they have some kind of a satisfaction on account of this big show off that organized religion tends to be. Now, as compared to the priests, the bishops have to show off a great deal more. And surely, they too, like the priests, are under the compulsion to show off, but in showing off, they have to be a living contradiction to the model of Jesus Christ, who was not under any obligation to show off because he was the truth. It's a very simple thing, a simple test. Whenever you feel that you need to show off, please remember that you are far away. You have cut yourself off from truth, that you're living on the foundation of illusions that you create for others and for yourself. So when you come across anyone in that category, for God's sake, for the sake of truth, for the sake of Jesus Christ who came into this world as the truth, please recognize that these people have nothing to do with Jesus, nothing to do with truth, nothing to do with God. And that was what Jesus Christ found out. And that's the reason why he denounced the hypocrisy of the priestly class in vehement terms. There is no compromise. Jesus could tolerate and forgive anything. But when it came to hypocrisy in the domain of religion, he was uncompromising. And he denounced it with all the force he could muster. Now, think of the delusion which prevailed in the domain of religion for a very long time, that animals can bear your sin, and if they are sacrificed, your sins are burned out or forgiven or whatever. Can you imagine a greater illusion than this? How can the sins that you committed be imputed to an animal and the animal sacrificed and you get the satisfaction that your sins are remitted? Is it possible? But this persisted with human beings for millennia. Why? Because religion is a domain of such illusions. Jesus, being the truth, put an end to animal sacrifices and all. In fact, he put an end to all the rituals and pretensions of the priestly class, and he shifted human life onto a different foundation. I have dealt with this subject in a very, very limited manner earlier, and I will not say more about it in the present context. Maybe on later occasions we'll have occasion to discover more about this. So the idea of sacrifices. Now, let me refer to its counterpart today. We don't sacrifice animals. Good, thank God, we have come out of it. But there is something called sacrificial giving. Most people don't realize that this idea of sacrificial giving is an alternative to living as truth. Now, very often sacrificial giving is driven by vanity, human vanity. That's why list of those who contribute to the causes sponsored by the church is published, put up. Sacrificial giving in this context means give beyond your means, which actually belongs to the domain of exploitation, employing human vanity. That's the truth, if truth be spoken. But then the point really is that this idea of sacrificial giving is a substitute for living according to the will of God. This idea of giving to quote unquote God's work is an illusion, or it is based on the illusion that by giving generously to quote unquote God's work, you are leading a religious life, you're leading a godly life, you're leading a righteous life. I challenge all of you to find out if anywhere in the four Gospels Jesus even mildly, accidentally suggests that donating something material to this, that, and the other is a substitute for living according to the will of God. Absolutely not. So, the illusion on which religions thrive and prosper materially is this canard that giving sacrificially out of your pocket to what is presumed to be God's work is a substitute, adequate substitute for living a godly life, a righteous life. It's an illusion, and it needs to be recognized as such. Not even for a moment am I suggesting that you should not give to good causes. What I'm saying is that this is not a substitute for leading a godly life. Now, I can rob 10 people, and then out of the huge amount I get, I can give away tithe to 10 churches. Then I would be recognized as a very pious, religious, exemplary Christian. Now, that is nonsense, utter nonsense. Money is not God. God cannot be bribed. God is mindful only, as David says in Psalm 51, I think it's verse 10. God minds only the truth of our inward life. He is not impressed with our money. He doesn't need our money. He needs only the purity of our heart. He needs only the joy of realizing that his children upon the earth are leading life in all its beauty, in all its fullness. So, this as far as the delusion of sacrificial giving being an adequate substitute for living a godly life. So, while Jesus says that money does not matter, that's why he says, freely you have received, freely give. Do not ever bring money into the sacred ministry. While Jesus said, no money, no money, no money, priests who claim to be the shepherds of our times, who follow the example of Jesus Christ, says, more money, more money, more money. And that is the reason, and this is not a disease that started yesterday. Look at the Temple of Jerusalem. The Temple of Jerusalem is incomplete without a market. So money must rule the roost. So the temple itself is a domain of this illusion that is a place of godliness, whereas it is a marketplace of profiteering, profit-seeking, money-making, money-worshipping. That's a reality globally. To give you one example, see, when apartheid was raging in South Africa, the Church of England was asked the question, why is it that the Church of England is keeping quiet about apartheid? Why is it that it is not denouncing this inhuman system in spite of all its publicly stated commitment to justice, etc.? The true answer was never given. The true answer was that the Church of England had huge investments in South Africa, and it feared that if it took a forthright stand on the question of apartheid in South Africa, it would stand to lose heavily in terms of its investment in that country. This is how things work, but this is never known to public. It's always behind the curtain. Now let's consider for a moment Jesus' view of religion. What did Jesus think of religion? And in this context, of course, we are thinking of this in the light of Jesus as the truth. Jesus realized that religion is established, whether it is Judaism, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is Christianity, any religion for that matter. That's why I'm not taking the name of specific religions. I'm talking about the generic term, religion. Jesus realized that religion is established on a principle or a pattern that we may call the inversion of reality. The inversion of reality, which spews up a world of illusions. And this is the reason why Jesus denounced priestcraft entirely. He never practiced priestcraft, never. Even though sacrifices, bird sacrifices, animal sacrifices were very current in those days, Jesus never offered anything in sacrifice. Jesus never advised anyone to offer anything in sacrifice. Jesus cleansed a leper, right? You find that in the 8th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. And after healing him, he says, go and show yourself to the priest. He does that with a fair sense of humor. Jesus had a tremendous and subtle sense of humor. This is not something that is spoken about. I enjoy Jesus' sense of humor because it's very creative, very subtle, very refined. It's very divine. Why does Jesus ask the cleansed leper to go and show himself to the priest and do the priestly prescriptions in order for him to be certified clean? You see, the priest cannot heal the leper. The priest cannot cleanse the leper. The priest can only issue a certificate based on the work God has done. And yet, it's the priest that must take all the credit as far as organized life is concerned. Jesus was actually underlining this hypocrisy, which is glossed over. It's a subject that can be studied for 1 full hour in itself. But let me move on. What about Jesus' ideas about the rules and regulations that abounded in Judaism? You see, the priests, the Pharisees in particular, were great experts in inventing rules and rules and rules, that they burdened the life of the people with a mountain of religious rules. And that's why Jesus, in the 23rd chapter of Matthew's Gospel, condemns the priestly class for burdening the life of the people. He was mainly referring to these rules, regulations, and the huge burdens that come upon people on account of them. Jesus did not set any store by these rules and regulations. Instead, he prescribed only one law, the law of love. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. Okay? Just as Jesus loves us, we have to love one another. Jesus also questioned the centrality of the Temple of Jerusalem. He said, bring this whole thing down, I will rebuild it in 3 days. What is the meaning? This is why I'm saying that Jesus has a sense of humor. Jesus says, look, you are so obsessed with this structure of brick and mortar, lifeless things. But there is something far more important, far more valuable, far more glorious than all this. And that's a human being. I'll build it in 3 days. Obviously, it is a reference to his resurrection. But the resurrection of the human person, right? Can any building in the world compare to the beauty and the godly goodness of a good human being? You spend all your time, all your energy, all your resources on erecting these monumental and grandiloquent structures, and you neglect the more fundamental duty, in fact, the only godly duty of building a new quality of life for human beings. That is the truth. It is this fundamental truth that is sought to be buried under this brick and mortar structure through its sort of hypnotizing visual effect. Even in the services that happen, the Sunday service or whatever, all rituals, whenever rituals are conducted, they are meant to have a hypnotic effect. This is what lay people don't know. I have been a priest for 40 years, so I can tell you this. The show of the ritual, there's no ritual without a public spectacle. That's meant to have a hypnotizing effect on people. So Therefore, Jesus rejected everything that induced illusion in people. And that, of course, he did because he was the truth. So now I come to an important point. The point is, when Jesus says, I am the truth, the meaning is not merely that he will not tell any lies, is not even that he will tell the truth in every situation. The real point is that Jesus came into this world as the truth in order to dwell in human beings as the principle of truth. So Jesus as the truth kindles the capacity for truth in others. That is a mighty thing to do. Even if you build 1,000 cathedrals, heaven-kissing cathedrals, it compares nothing. It means nothing compared to this one thing, that is kindling the capacity for truth in one human being, is far greater than building 1,000 heaven-kissing, impressive cathedrals. That is Jesus' insight, that's Jesus' norm. I cannot but state it in public. So Jesus sees through this facade of illusions and comes straight to the human condition. And therefore, in this entire series, my insight is that Jesus is God's intervention in the human condition. And surely one inalienable aspect of that is Jesus as the truth. So Jesus sweeps away these illusions which fill the domain of religion, and he introduces, or he fills that space with truth. For example, Jesus emphasizes the primacy of suffering. See, most people turn to religion in order to avert suffering. They believe that if they are godly, no harm will come to them. They will suffer no earthly loss, rather they will prosper, and therefore they won't have the need to suffer. Jesus says, no, you have to suffer. Suffering is inevitable. To live is to suffer. And suffering is for your good, because suffering is the only school in which human beings can be educated into true humanity. There's no other school. Jesus suffered. You see, the hypocrisy of Christians is, or the unconscious contradiction in which Christians live is, that they are mighty pleased that Jesus died on the cross. And they assume that it is done in order that Christians may be spared suffering. Now, I consider this absolutely ridiculous, absurd. Rather, I look at the cross to train myself, or to be trained to cope with my suffering creatively, so that it is transmuted into some value which can enrich the life of others. And I'm truly immensely grateful to God for giving me this insight, that suffering is really the raw material of the new life. New life cannot emerge without suffering. In our first birth, our mother suffered in giving birth to us. In the second birth, when we are born again, we have to suffer. Our being born again can happen only through the medium of suffering. This is why in an earlier unit I said that as far as being born again is concerned, we have to be our own mothers. We have to give birth to ourselves. And that can happen only through extreme suffering. And that is the message of the cross. Secondly, Jesus addressing the delusions and illusions that choke the domain of religion, he said, look, no shortcut is valid. There are no easy solutions. You have to grow. God's will for you is that you grow to the utmost possibilities God has invested in you. You are created potentially in a glorious way. Your possibilities are immense and exciting. You are living in utter oblivion, perhaps in willful denial of these great possibilities. If only you can grow to your full stature, all the problems of the world, including your own problems, will disappear. On the other hand, if you stay like this, a caricature of a human being, that is what we are, most people in this world. And I often feel that about myself. I've not reached anywhere. I wish I could say I'm exemplifying life in all its fullness. Yes, I'm aware of that glorious goal. I'm crawling towards it in a bleeding, halting manner. So, Jesus' great revelation is that all these religious practices would not help you at all. They mean zilch if you don't grow to your full stature. All these religious practices are very good, extremely good, if they help you to grow. But if they don't, they mean nothing, absolutely nothing. That is the truth. And I learned that truth from Jesus Christ, who is the truth. I wouldn't have known it but for him. That's the reason why I'm excited about sharing this with you. So, now in this context, I'm going to close on that. I'll continue this reflection into the next unit because it is so fundamental and so centrally important. Now, I've been so far talking about religion as a domain of illusions. Let me sort of illustrate it with something that all of us are very familiar, something that's of great ubiquitous presence today in the Christian world. The most deceptive, subhuman dramatization of the prosperity gospel. My dear friends, a greater insult than this cannot be heaped on Jesus Christ. To create this grand illusion of Jesus as a lottery ticket, Jesus as the means to attain mega wealth, fortune, earthly pleasures, to present Jesus Christ as a cosmic ATM card or a kind of over-generous Santa Claus. All you have to do is to go to an expert, a God man, whose main qualifications are he is not burdened by a conscience, he has no sense of shame, he has no inhibitions, he has no accountability, and there's not an iota of truth in him. He's a past master, he's an expert in deception. He is the merchant of illusions and delusions. And I'm speaking from Kerala, where this has become an epidemic. Thousands and thousands of people flock to these huge deceivers of men, the merchants of the prosperity gospel, who pretend that they have the capacity to heal any disease. They can prophesy what's going to happen next year, day after, or 50 years from now. And also they can make sure that whatever you wish will be fulfilled and God will be obliged to deliver the goods that you desire. Utter mockery, unimaginable mockery of the way of Jesus Christ. Why does this thrive? In spite of the fact that in Kerala Christianity has existed for 2000 years, Kerala has become the crucible of this satanic eruption of religious delusion. It is because the kind of religiosity that has been nurtured in our churches is the religiosity of delusion. Mainland churches subsisted on mild variations of illusions and delusions. But these modern market-savvy experts in prosperity gospel are 100 times more talented than the priestly class of mainland churches in weaving, projecting, and selling delusions. Therefore, a people who are habituated to subsisting on delusions will run after these godmen. They are godmen because they have nothing to do with God. Yes, they have something to do with God. They sell God piecemeal. And it's a pathetic thing to see how many people are glad to be fooled by them day after day after day. And when thousands are fooled, thousands still flock to them because nobody wants to confess in public that he's been taken for a royal ride. Those who get cheated sit in the corner and lick their wounds, and others walk into the trap. This goes on and on and on. Why? Because, we say that history repeats itself, man never learns. And that's so very true about religion. Even if right in front of you, 100 people are cheated by a godman, you will still go to him. Somehow it's like, gambling. Maybe next time I'll win. Next time, my turn will come. This foolish and fond hope sustains the human craving for delusions and illusions. And people who are smart enough, unscrupulous enough to thrive on it, rake in a mega buck. This is a shame that's happening with particular intensity and prevalence in Kerala. I'm sure it's happening elsewhere also, and that's the reason why I use very strong words about it. I'm sorry I have to do so, because our theme is Jesus is the truth. So instead of turning to him, people turn to God-man as an alternative to being with Jesus, because being with Jesus is a demanding thing. He doesn't sort of entertain us with false hopes. He doesn't deceive us with pretensions and spectacles of insincerity. He demands the truth from us. And facing the truth is not an easy thing. But ultimately, there is no alternative to facing the truth. For truth alone will help you. And as Jesus said, and I'm going to close on these words, the truth will set you free. We continue our reflection on the same theme in the next unit, because there is much more to be said on this. And this is, as I said, a central theme in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. And if we don't understand this properly, we may not be able to understand much of his teachings in its true spirit and in its truth. I pray that God may bless us through this shared journey, this shared pilgrimage of encountering the meaning of Jesus' teaching, because I believe that matters concerning our peace upon this earth and our assurance regarding eternity are in these teachings. More than anything else, the secret of being human is in this teaching. And therefore, it is so very important that we imbibe the words of Jesus Christ in their true meanings, and that's what we have set ourselves to do. Thank you for being part of this journey.